Welcome to today's webinar on the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, presented by FEMA's Public Assistance Training Design and Development section. I'm going to start with a brief overview of what the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, hereby referred to just as EMAC. EMAC is a national interstate mutual aid agreement that provides a straightforward system for members to share resources across jurisdictions during declared emergencies and disasters. Very similar to public assistance, EMAC has established reimbursement procedures and policies for sharing resources, including cost eligibility and documentation requirements. Because of the EMAC process and oversight, public assistance reimbursement for EMAC performed work projects is considered to be low risk to FEMA. A point of clarification in terminology, EMAC uses the term requesting state, assisting state, and resource provider, whereas FEMA only uses requesting entity and providing entity. Since FEMA does not provide PA funding directly to the providing entity, it is the requesting entity who is responsible for requesting reimbursement for public assistance eligible expenses. For the purpose of this presentation, we're going to use FEMA's terminology of requesting entity and providing entity. Now we're going to cover the overall EMAC process. First, the governor must declare an emergency or disaster which authorizes funds for response and recovery and activates EMAC. The requesting state requests resources through the EMAC operation system, which begins the process. In turn, potential assisting states must submit offers of assistance after contacting local resource providers. The requesting and assisting states jointly complete the Resource Support Agreement, or RSA, for accepted offers of assistance. Once the RSA is complete, personnel prepare for the mission, conduct the mission in the requesting state, and then return home. On returning from a mission, deployed personnel submit a reimbursement package with the cost documentation to the resource provider. Cost documentation generally includes timesheets, labor and travel policies, receipts for travel expenses, equipment and mileage logs, and other detailed documentation pertinent to the mission. The resource provider reviews cost documentation and summarizes mission expenses on the R2 form, which is sent to the assisting state. The assisting state compiles the R2 forms from the resource provider and validates the total amounts based on the cost documentation. The assisting state summarizes mission expenses from the R2 forms, and the total is reported on the R1 form for the requesting state. Finally, the requesting state reimburses the assisting state, regardless if the event receives federal funding. On this slide, we have identified two EMAC project examples that have received PA funding. First, we have California. Here, states provided personnel, vehicles, and aircraft to assist California fighting wildfires in 2020. In this project, FEMA provided PA funding to California as the requesting entity, while the other states were the providing entities. Then, in Louisiana, Puerto Rico and Texas provided personnel to assist Louisiana with search and rescue efforts in response to Hurricane Ida. In this case, Louisiana was the requesting entity that FEMA provided PA funding to. FEMA has simplified requirements for reimbursement of EMAC work on major disasters and emergencies declared on or after September 6, 2022. EMAC members follow the reimbursement eligibility and documentation guidelines in the EMAC Operations Manual. FEMA will not perform a separate reasonable cost analysis in cases where EMAC guidelines were followed. And FEMA has reduced the overall documentation requirements for EMAC projects. To streamline administrative processes, requesting entities may request a standalone project for reimbursement of cost for EMAC work. Now we're going to briefly touch upon the documentation requirements for EMAC work reimbursement. To support the scope of work and cost eligibility for EMAC reimbursement, FEMA only requires the following documentation: the EMAC Resource Support Agreement, with redacted PII, which is personally identifiable information, the R1 form, all associated R2 forms, and proof of payment by the requesting entity to the providing entity. The RSA is the only form FEMA requires for initial obligation. The remaining documents are required to reconcile cost and close the project. However, those may be provided with the RSA if available at that time. Here's an example of the EMAC RSA. The RSA is an agreement signed between the requesting and providing entities. It contains the mission details, includes a description of the emergency service function for which assistance is needed, the type of personnel, equipment, materials, and supplies needed, resource quantities, the length of time resources are needed, and a cost summary of expected mission costs. The R1 is the reimbursement form between the requesting and providing entities. It is completed by the providing entity and summarizes the EMAC mission cost. The R1 contains the actual cost of all interstate assistance delivered by a providing entity and has copies of receipts and payment vouchers attached to it. Once the R1 is completed, it is signed and then sent to the requesting entity for reimbursement. Now the R2 is the reimbursement form between the providing entity and the resource providers. It is completed by each resource provider and summarizes actual costs provided by an organization to the providing entity. Supporting cost documentation is also attached to the R2, and these R2s are then compiled for the providing entity to validate, sign, and send to the requesting entity. Additional resources are available. For more information about EMAC or your documentation responsibilities as an applicant, you can visit the EMAC website directly at www.emacweb.org. You can also reach out to your FEMA regional point of contact, or if assigned, your FEMA program delivery manager. You can call the customer support hotline, whose contact information will be listed at the end of this video. You can also review the Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide, specifically their section on mutual aid.
Now we have some compliance information for you.
If you are working with any documents used for a FEMA grant, you are responsible for safeguarding personally identifiable information, or PII. PII refers to anything that can be used to directly or indirectly identify an individual. Some examples of PII are names, addresses, social security numbers, and financial account information. This type of information must not be uploaded into Grants Portal or Grants Manager. To report corruption, waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, and/or misconduct, contact the Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General by phone at 1-800-323-8603 or via the website or mailing address listed on the screen now. Procurement requirements are among the most complicated parts of the PA grant process, and noncompliance can result in deobligation of funding. Please make sure that you are following FEMA's procurement guidance for recipients and subrecipients. Federal requirements for procurement and contracting are described in 2 CFR Part 200. The Procurement Disaster Assistance Team, or PDAT, offers some training and tools on their website, www.fema.gov/grants/procurement. For technical assistance with Grants Portal or Grants Manager, you can call the PA Grants Portal Grants Manager hotline at 866-337-8448. National hours of operation are 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. The hotline can also be reached by email at FEMA-recovery-PA-grants@fema.dhs.gov. We have many other recorded webinars and tutorial videos available on our YouTube channel. You can find them by searching for FEMA Grants Portal on YouTube or by navigating to the Support Center in Grants Portal or Grants Manager.
Thank you for watching.